Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be, and welcome to today's Destination Insight series. And today we will with BBC and Pada. Today we will be highlighting incredible India, a beautiful destination with a lot to offer today's traveler. Before we start, let me just first introduce myself. My name is Paul Prangan. I am the Director of Communications and External Affairs at the Pacific Asia Travel Association, and I will be your host for today's webinar. Before we get to the opening remarks from the PATA CEO, just wanted to get to a couple of technical notes. I know that many of you are aware of using how to use Zoom, but for those of you who don't, please note at the bottom of your screen, there's two functions. There's a chat function and a Q&A function. For the chat function, please use that to engage with other participants and panelists. Um, Please note though, when you use the chat function, default is sending a message to all the panelists and not the participants. So if you want to talk to other participants and say hello, just make sure on the drop-down menu it says panelists and attendees. Please do not submit functions using the chat function. It's difficult for the moderator to sort of go back and forth between the chat function and the Q&A function, as there's a lot on the screen. So if you have any questions, please make sure to use the Q&A function to submit any questions during today's webinar. And with that, that is all of my notes for today's session. So let's just jump right into our opening remarks. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome PATA CEO, Dr. Mario Harley. Mario, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Very good afternoon to everyone who's joining us from around the world, or good morning, good evening, wherever you are around the world. It's a great pleasure to be back on this BBC series, which we started last year. I believe this is our fifth or sixth one that we've been doing so far in collaborations with BBC. So first and foremost, a huge thanks to BBC for supporting these initiatives. It's a great way for our audience, for our members, for the industry to stay up to date as to what's happening in each respective destinations around the PATA regions. And today we'll be actually discovering more about India. I'm really anxious to know more about the state of tourism in India at the moment, and more specifically also about the domestic tourism, which was already large before COVID-19, and understand if it actually has been any growth in that period of time. Obviously, all of us are even equally interested, if not even more interested, in knowing about the future of opening of borders and international travel. So thank you all, everyone, for joining us today, and I look forward to today's session. Paul, back over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mario. Let's just jump right into it. With us today, moderating today's session is our good friend here at the BBC's Travel Show. Welcome back, Rajan, and I'll let you begin right into the fireside chat. So over to you.
Thank you, Paul and Mario. First of all, may I say it's my pleasure again to be with you virtually and definitely in spirit at this joint PATA and BBC forum. This extraordinary period in global history continues, and I remain full of admiration for how the world of tourism remains resilient, as exemplified really by our partners in Asia. And of course, very few of us have been untouched by the suffering and personal tragedy that this virus has wreaked on so many families and communities around the world. On a lighter note, just to say, we at the Travel Show, the BBC Travel Show, we are soldiering on to produce shows that aim to both reflect the issues being faced in the travel industry and to provide some escapism for viewers. And the fact is, as several surveys have shown, there is huge pent-up demand for travel. It's just a question of when it can be unleashed. So to India, one of the big giants of tourism, probably on more wish lists or bucket lists than virtually any other country, I'd say. A country that, as you may guess, I've got personal family connections with, and one that I've visited to make many, many programs over the years. The last one actually was exploring the western and eastern extremes of the country, which was yet another brilliant revelation for me when I thought I couldn't be surprised anymore by India. But today, the question is, what is the position of tourism there, and how is it preparing for the time when international travel can return? Well, hopefully, my special guest can enlighten us on that one. So I'm very pleased to introduce Ms. Rupinder Brar, who's the additional Director General at the Ministry of Tourism of the Government of India. Thank you so much for stepping in at the last moment, actually, for this. Hi there. Can I ask you just first of all, for those people who don't perhaps know that much about India, can you give us like a snapshot of how tourism was faring before the COVID crisis?
So first, a very good afternoon to everyone who's tuned in. And it's a glorious afternoon in India. And if I tell you that what all India was offering before COVID struck, and I'm happy, Rajan, that you said that every time that you came here, you got a surprise, right? And that's what Incredible India is all about. When we look at India, I think India had so many offerings coming up in the just before COVID happened. We were kind of sort of taking off, so to say. And the foreign tourist inflow had jumped up to 10.93 million. And what was so encouraging for us as a country was that while in 2014-15, we were still hovering at a World Economic Forum's ranking of 64, but we had actually jumped up to 34 in 2019. And that was a massive jump of 30 odd ranks in just a matter of 4+5 years. So it was an exciting time for us. I thought we were doing all the right things in pitching the country. Incredible India 2.0 campaign had been launched, and we got some awards for the movies, and people were really, really excited. And not just the inbound, but even the domestic tourist was moving away from just visiting grandmom, grandpa kind of, and actually stepping out and joining the adventure trails that, so much was happening. It's a pity in some ways, therefore, that we needed to do what we needed to do in COVID. But, well, out of all adversities, we hope that very soon we shall be moving further ahead.
You just alluded to little areas of growth that were happening, surprising areas perhaps. Can you just give me some examples of that? I mean, it's, again, before COVID, but I guess what can pick up again once international travel starts again?
You see, what was interesting was that typically and traditionally, India, if you come, you've been exposed to the Golden Triangle. So you landed in Delhi and you went to Agra, you went to Jaipur, you went to Bharatpur, and you probably just did that stretch. But what was exciting in the last few years was that many more things were opening up. So if you came to India, you didn't just come to Rajasthan or Kerala, but you actually started visiting so many other destinations because we've added a huge amount of flight connectivity within India. So Odisha was getting added, the northeast part of India was getting added with all its amazing sanctuaries and the rivers that they have there. Jammu and Kashmir, interestingly, was showing so much more interest, Himachal, the ecotourism, and going into the hinterland and the sanctuaries in Madhya Pradesh. And of course, not to forget the world's tallest statue at Kevadia near Ahmedabad. We have the world's tallest statue in Kevadia, which is about 3 to 4 hours drive from Ahmedabad in Gujarat. And we've had the highest number of tourists on a given day before COVID. So I think some really exciting things were happening. And as I said, we hope we're going to get back to those really soon.
Well, let's talk about that. Give me your kind of view on the prospects for the future. I mean, I've heard kind of good, fingers crossed, but good news about India in terms of both the infection rates and vaccination implementation. So how do you see it? What's the game plan now?
Well, fingers crossed, right? And we are glad that we as a country, as a people, have had relatively, I would say, less impact on ourselves as a country. And that's helping. And now with the vaccine having rolled out, clearly the confidence levels are beginning to come back. People are moving about. And what has been really a fantastic learning about our own people is that when the government stepped out and said, you do need to wear your mask and you need to keep the social distancing and you need to stay home, people actually respected that and hugely respected that. And I think to that extent, it's allowed us as a country to start inching back towards normalcy far more. And if we look back the last 3 + 4, almost 4 months, the domestic travel has increased substantially. Almost 80% of the domestic flights are back on trajectory. And if you look at some of the destinations, particularly the homestays and the staycations and places that are closer to nature are witnessing almost full occupancy. In fact, I was in Kashmir last week, and we did not even get a single room in Gulmarg. And they said 28th February, we are blocked till 28th February, come back to us in March. So that's the kind of research we are witnessing in the domestic market, and that's very, very encouraging.
And when it comes to international, how do you see it panning out?
Well, we are in a very close contact and conversation with both the Ministry of Health, which is a nodal ministry to really take a call on this, and the Ministry of Home, which actually does the enabling of the visas. And I can only say at this juncture that we're keeping a close watch on our own situation, which is, as I said, thankfully very good. But since we need to get people in from markets around the world, it's a period of wait, and hopefully soon we should be able to, with all the due safeguards in place, start getting all of you back to India.
I mean, I've got to say, obviously from my perspective, I'm here in the UK, which is a big source market for international travel to India. The prospects aren't great at the moment. I mean, frankly, it's people are being discouraged even from booking summer holidays here. Nonetheless, there are certainly other parts of the world, and certainly within the Asian region, where and Pacific, where it's much rosier, if you like, in terms of COVID. So can you see arrangements with individual countries, bubbles as they call them?
Yes, certainly we could work on those also. And in fact, even in the campaigns that we're going to run this time, there is going to be a lot of outreach to the Southeast Asian and the South Asian destinations, which are shorter haul flights. And also these are countries that have relatively been less ravaged, let's say, by the pandemic. So yes, we would want to work on that. We would love to have all of you back, but then looking at the conditions in UK for now, traditionally a huge source market, and USA, yes, things still a little vulnerable, I guess.
I mean, one aspect that all tourists from wherever they are will be thinking about is health and hygiene. There are obviously in India a lot of areas where it's very crowded and congested. And how will you provide reassurance to tourists in the international tourists in the future that these standards will be high?
So Rajan, I'll say 2-3 dimensions to that answer. One is the more technical answer, where we say that we came out with the guidelines in consultation with the Ministry of Health way back in June. And that's when the gradual unlockdown sort of started, and we brought in all the hospitality units, and there is a new program that the ministry is running, which is all about a system of certification. It's a self-certification where you take on the responsibility of following the 10 pointers, which will create a confidence in a traveler that I am a unit that is COVID sort of safe. And we've ensured that we've sent out the guidelines to all the tour operators, taxi operators, and also cinema halls and the monuments of the Archaeological Survey of India. So everybody is on board. We've had a huge, response from all of them, and the dialogues have happened at various levels. And we're not stopping at having one dialogue or 2 dialogues. It's a dialogue which we are doing every few weeks with all our stakeholders and getting fantastic response. But the other, and I would say the non-technical part of the reassurance is that we ourselves as Indians have begun so much travel. And yet, if you see the numbers of the COVID, they are being kind, right? And I think that itself creates a huge confidence that if all of us are stepping out and traveling so extensively, and still if the numbers are being at the level that they are, we hope that that itself, the image that goes out of a country that's already moving about, we hope that that itself will create a lot of confidence in all the inbound travelers, that clearly as a country, as a people, we must be doing something right to be at the kind of numbers that we are at.
Do you envisage the whole notion of for the foreseeable future, people coming in to international travel when it resumes, coming in and having the negative test result from within 72 hours, being quarantined, having tests again, or having a health passport? How do you see it?
It would be a little preliminary for me to really answer that. But having said that, yes, we would be suggesting that if somebody's coming in with a COVID negative test, which has been done just 72 hours, but on landing, if the authorities, for one reason or the other, do feel that the person needs to perhaps go through another round of testing, do an immediate testing process at the airport, the RT-PCR test, well, you could do that and do hopefully quarantine only in cases that truly seemingly seem to be kind of deserving to do that, but not across the board. We would be hoping that that happens as much as all of you, because we need all of you to come back to us. But I guess we would finally have to leave that call with the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Home.
Okay, we're running a little bit short time just for this section, but there's a couple of more things I want to ask you. In terms of tourism, when it was particularly bad in terms of COVID, the little guy is who I'm concerned about, really, more than the big companies. How did you support from the government side? How did you support the little guy in tourism?
It's been a tough time, and I'm sure it would not be appropriate to close one's eyes to how harsh the first few months particularly have been to the entire supply chain. And definitely the guys on the margins are the ones who've really got hit. We've tried to come out in terms of creating demand, because we realized that the best way was to start creating the demand. And that's where the domestic tourism really was our top priority. That was also the input coming from all studies of UNWTO, the WTTCI, and all other consultancy reports suggesting that domestic was the biggest fallback guy upon. And fortunately in India, we are not short either on the market or on the destinations. And so we worked very closely with the state governments, the provincial governments, to open up the lesser known and the not so frequented areas and started creating demand. And I'm really happy to share with you that while the larger part of the demand actually started picking up around the end of September or early October, but the short little travel, just stepping out and going and eating at a roadside eatery also had actually started coming up even before that. So that was one way where we started really creating a support for the guys on the margin.
Sorry to interrupt. And as you said, that domestic tourism has really grown. And how much has it compensated for the lack of international tourism?
I wouldn't say that it can take the place for international tourism, because international tourism has its own huge value, both in terms of numbers and also in terms of foreign exchange. However, it has come up, and that's what I would say is a sort of a silver lining, because it was a component of tourism which we were kind of sort of assuming to be there. But COVID made you realize that here there was a very serious vertical, which we were not working on in such an organized manner. And so I think in some senses, therefore, all the stakeholders, including all of us in the government, have also been very pleasantly woken up to the potential of domestic tourism. And while it may not substitute or while it may not take the place, and why should it? But it has come up as a huge support mechanism for the industry in a period where you need to definitely revive yourself and survive. I think it's been a great support mechanism.
Okay, you're going to stay with us, I know, because we're going to have a group chat with people from various sectors in the Indian tourism industry. But just my last point to you, which is let's end on a good positive note. People talk about resetting the travel industry. People talking about irreversible change in a good way, perhaps. How do you see? I think you mentioned one, looking at domestic tourism. But what other changes do you think are here to stay now, and perhaps even been accelerated by the COVID situation?
That's where I think we can say the silver linings, right? I think India had so much potential of ecotourism. It had so much potential of just heading out to sanctuaries. I mean, we have more than 500 wildlife sanctuaries. If you look at the mountains up in the Himalayas, the places that you can go and stay in and just be away from the mad crowd, so to say. So the immense potential that we have in India of these kind of places is something we hope that the industry is going to work with us together, and we should be working at leveraging the natural and the more open kind of heritage that India has. And of course, not to take away from the need to go and see the forts and the monuments, So a lot of these places are going to be technology enabled in terms of gaining entry to those places. And technology will play a huge role in creating contactless travel and enabling people to be able to do processes without actually, hand-to-hand touch. So technology definitely we see coming in a big way in creating not just information, but actually enabling travel. So those are some of the changes we hope that are going to stay, and those are our strength areas, and we hope that as a country we will be definitely leveraging on them.
Okay, Rupinder, thank you so much for now. Stick around because we're going to have this group conversation soon. But for the time being, I'm going to hand back to Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajan. Sorry for that pause. Yes, as he said, that we'll be right back with them just in a little bit. Both Rajan and Rupinder will come back for the panel discussion with our other colleagues. But before we get to the panel discussion, I'd like to introduce from BBC Global News, their sales director of South Asia, Mr. Vishal Bhatnagar. Hopefully I said that right. He's going to give us a little bit of insights on India from our good friends at BBC. Rajan, you can turn the camera off and come back after his presentation as well. So Vishal, I will pass this over to you.
Thank you, Paul. I'll just share my screen a bit. Right. I hope you can see my screen now, Paul.
Yes, looks good.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That was an interesting discussion. Whilst the authorities are obviously doing a great work in getting tourism back on the rails, I think it'll also be a good time to just get a glimpse into the minds of the traveler. And we on our part have been regularly sort of keeping tabs on our audience in terms of, what are they looking at? What are their behaviors and insights into travel? And I think it'll be a good time to just share a quick glimpse into the minds of our readers on travel. So when it comes to travel, both business as well as leisure, BBC audiences across regions continues to show a markedly high affinity for India vis-a-vis those who do not consume the BBC. For example, in Europe, our audience is 61% more likely to travel to India for business in the coming year, than non-viewers, of course, subject to travel opening up. And also, for our European viewers, India continues to be a higher priority for travel vis-a-vis some of the other countries in the region like Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, Sri Lanka, etc. Similarly, in APAC, roughly 42, viewers are 42% more likely to visit South Asia for a leisure holiday in the coming year. And this is, again, a very high spending audience, with a third spending nearly upwards of $5,000 on an average holiday. Moving on to the US, the same trends visible there as well, with their audience, with the American audience, 66% more likely to visit India for either business or leisure in the coming year. Again, this is a very high spending audience. So, clearly, I think the intent is there for the audiences to travel. It's all now up to the situation, how it clears up and how travel opens up. Moving in, and when we look at the intent to travel, this is across all regions. And travel is a higher priority for the BBC's international audience. When we look at APAC, for example, vis-a-vis non-viewers or the average population, nearly 54% said that they would like to travel as soon as travel opens up. Europe, nearly half of our audience is keen to travel, and then that comes down to about 39% for North America. Again, significantly higher across the non-viewers. And I think the numbers for each of these regions also reflect the actual situation on the ground as far as the pandemic is concerned, which is why you see fewer numbers, lesser numbers in North America as compared to, say, APAC, where the situation on the ground is increasing very rapidly. Moving into India, amongst our Indian audience, the intent to travel has been growing steadily up. And this holds both for domestic as well as international travel. So if you look back from April, nearly 33% said that they would be keen to have a domestic travel in the near future as soon as it was permitted. And at that time, because of the scenario being uncertain, all travel being shut, only 6% said that international holidays is on the cards, or at least they hope to travel. And that, when we measured back, in August, this had climbed up to about 46% intend to travel domestically, and then international travel moving up to about 27%. And I think our experience in India in the last 3 months, as was discussed in the previous chat, that we've seen a lot of domestic travel sort of picking up. Destinations like Goa, Kerala, the states up in the north, the hill states, they saw some phenomenal tourism pick up in the last 3 months. So things are moving back up steadily, I think. And similarly, what exactly are readers looking for when they travel? So whilst most of the preferred holiday activities, if you look at that, continue to carry over from pre-COVID times, things like exploring history and heritage, which is a top priority for a global audience, and then peace, tranquility, relaxation, R&R, which is again a top priority for Indian audiences, and then obviously affordability, pricing, and these are all sort of common things. But what is interesting is some new priorities that have emerged in the wake of the pandemic, and it appears that trust, health, and safety are criteria that are likely to play a greater role in travel choice going forward. In terms of travel-related content and engagement on our platforms, even when most people were confined to their homes, the wanderlust, I think that sort of stayed strong right through. People access travel-related content on our sites, on our platforms to, I think, escape the tedium of the lockdown. And as fears sort of ease off, and I think as travel opens up, this is now translating into active search for travel options. And consumption of travel-related content on the BBC across platforms has shown a steady growth over the last 3 months, which is quite encouraging. And I think that this also is a insight in terms of this being an actionable in the near future in terms of this translating into actual transactions for travel. And this interest and this engagement with content continues even into advertising and branded content. And I think it's been proven amply that in a trusted environment, audience see real value in ads if they're placed responsibly. And the approval rating for advertising and branded content has moved up to about 65% even in July, and I think that's likely to be higher, and we are due to measure this next month again. Keeping in light of all the new sort of emerging and changing demands from the consumers, we've launched a very interesting new travel planning tool in partnership with IATA. And this provides a consolidated source of trusted, time-stamped information for our audiences. This commercial product will marry IATA data and marry it with a wealth of travel-related content that BBC has, and this will basically provide lots of options in terms of itineraries, other sort of regulatory information, etc., at the fingertips of the viewer. Some of the other information that you're likely to find on Explore a New World, which is this new tool, is detailed information on destinations and the most up-to-date travel protocols at the destinations for arrivals from their own source countries. Then this will also have relevant, editorially aligned and fresh BBC travel content specific to the destination. And this is likely to basically, for upper funnel conversion, likely to sort of inspire and give new options for travel, as well as provide lower funnel information in terms of actual, access information, restrictions locally, travel guide, health guidelines, etc. And then we will also supplement this editorial information with user-generated social media content from current travelers who are either in that country or the destination at the moment, or who have recently been there in the recent past. And that, I think, also provides some reassurance and sort of more granular information from the source to people who are planning to travel to these countries. So I think this will prove to be an extremely useful tool, and this is available for commercial partnership across our markets, and we will be introducing this here in India as well very soon. So this is, a quick sort of snapshot into the minds of a traveling audience. And I hope this was useful. Thank you very much, Paul. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Vishal. You can you can turn your camera off, and
Yeah,
we're going to
thanks.
go right back to Rajan here as we get into the panel discussion. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Rajan, and I'll let him introduce his fellow panelists. Over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, so we now have three guests as well as Rupinder, but these three guests are from different sectors really of the Indian tourism industry. We have Renu Basu, who's part of the executive team, this is from the hotel sector, and leads global sales and marketing at IHCL, where her responsibilities include sales, marketing, loyalty, and digital marketing. And she is a seasoned professional with over 3 decades of experience, and she's focusing on ensuring that IHCL is the single most iconic and profitable company in the hotel industry. So we'll see about that when we're ready. Then we have Vikram Madok, who is Managing Director of Abercrombie and Kent India Limited, obviously a tour company. He was associated with Taj and the Oberoi Group of hotels for 13 years, so he knows about that sector. He joined Abercrombie and Kent in 1997, and he has been subsequently promoted to take over as managing director. Now, A&K, Abercrombie and Kent, is a global travel company with, I think, 55 offices in over 30 countries. And then we have Willie Bolter, who's the Chief Commercial Officer. This is airlines now I'm talking about, of Indigo. He's been in the company for nearly 3 years, but he has worked at pretty well every airline in the business, it strikes me, certainly a lot of them. And he's got specific functional experience in most areas of airline commercial activities. Rupinder is also back with us, and I'm going to say to all of you, feel free to chip in at any point with anything you want to add to the previous speaker. I think, first of all, let's just get a lowdown on how each of your sectors has been faring since COVID kicked in, really, and perhaps just give a state of play for now as to how you're thinking about the future. Let's start with you, Renu, and hotels. How do you see it?
Yeah, thank you for having us here today. Well, it's been a really rough ride for our business, which is travel and tourism, beginning with the first week of March, when the alert was all out to be careful. And I have to say the government took a very good call to institute the lockdown. While they instituted the lockdown, it did have an adverse impact on us. And we till 2019-20, we closed the financial year. The Indian hotel industry closed the occupancies at 62% over the previous year, which was 65%. So the March occupancies did definitely have an impact on the fortunes, and that was seen by what Rupinder also mentioned. And well, we decided that we had to turn this crisis into an opportunity. So the first thing we did was we created an outreach with our customers to give them comfort and confidence that we will be flexible with their cancellation policies, re-enhanced our our protocols that we were practicing at the hotels, which of course have been intensified over a period of time with the ministry and the Ministry of Health and Welfare. And also we went into creating a lot of new offers and new products. And like Rupinder mentioned, we realized that people would be scared to travel by air because we didn't know that it was going to unfold the way it did. But we started looking at all our destinations that are close to the main metro cities, which are the source markets where people can drive to. So we mapped all those destinations, and we found that drivecations was really one of the first businesses to bounce back. And once some of the states started opening up, and we saw a lot of good news coming from certain states. So before I go there, I want to just touch upon working with the government on accommodating people who are trying to get out of the country. A lot of people from different nationalities were stuck in different parts of the country, getting them out, and they stayed at our hotels. It was a very marginal occupancy. The The second thing was the Vande Bharat flights, so people who were coming in. Again, there we worked with the government, worked out some very special rates so people could quarantine safely in the hotels. It was initially 14 days and went down to 7 days. And then, of course, we were, doing deliveries of food or pickup of food from the hotels. And then it started unfolding with domestic travel, driving destinations because people couldn't fly because there were no flights operating, with staycations at hotels when the government allowed it. So we worked very closely with the government to follow all the protocols and the mandates that were set by the government, because we have to be seen to be, demonstrating appropriate behavior, and not just doing our own thing. And then we, focused very aggressively on the domestic market. So the first two states that opened up were Rajasthan, Karnataka, followed by Goa. And we saw a huge surge in demand there and the destinations there. We have a large portfolio of hotels in Rajasthan with our palaces. Goa, we have about 13 hotels. And in Karnataka, we have a large number of hotels, but the one most prominent area is Coorg. And we also have a large, huge group of Amma hotels, which is our homestays, which Rupinder also mentioned that, they've really caught on and people have been staying there for almost 6 to 8 months to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city. And then we found that as it unfolded and from September onwards, we saw the demand. And like Rupinder mentioned that in Srinagar, she couldn't get a room. The same thing is happening in the states of Goa, Rajasthan, in Rishikesh, and Coorg and Kerala as well. So we have seen that domestic has really been a big demand driver for us. The other thing is weddings, because India is, it's very inherent to our culture. We have the same amount or more number of weddings, but obviously the numbers are restricted. So where we used to allow 1,000 people, we follow the government guidelines of 50 to 100 as each state allows it. So that demand has not, flagged at all. That's been, moving very well. And also there's been a demand from sports related activities. So if you see, we have this IPL, which moved to Dubai, but we have the football league, which is happening in Goa right now. So there have been a lot of opportunities that we have cashed in on. And we also reinvented ourselves and started a food delivery app called Cumin. So we didn't want to waste this crisis to look at different opportunities. So this is some of the things that we did, and we work very closely with the government, with our domestic tour operators. We work very closely with Vikram, but there's not much till the borders are closed, and we work with the airlines because they get our travelers in. But here I would like to say that trusted brands and domestic brands will really thrive in this because there's a huge amount of confidence in them. And of course, health and safety is the most important factor guiding people's choice of hotels and behavior. And I do believe that the COVID cases are well handled in our country, and this is a good start for us.
It's interesting that you mentioned that some of the hotels in the kind of more remote areas or the more countryside areas are doing very well. I mean, that's going to be very much the future, isn't it? I think particularly with international travel too. People are going to want to go out, aren't they, into the more quieter rural areas. Nature is going to be the big thing. Is that right?
Yes, they want open air. They want the perception of clean, crisp air. So we don't have hotels in this region, but if you go to a place near Delhi, in the Kumaon area, most of Delhi in the summer, as soon as they could travel, hit the mountains, and they were staying there for 6 months. And from Bombay, they were going to a place called Alibag, which is just 2-hour drive during the monsoons, and it's a boat ride during this period. So people have just escaped because you can work from anywhere now. But domestic travel is really something that has, of course, we miss our foreign travelers, but they'll be back soon.
And that takes me to Willie, actually, in terms of airlines, because I think you're quoted as saying in November, you said you were surprised by the demand from customers. And I presume that was obviously domestic demand. Is that right?
Yes, I mean, our focus has been very much on domestic because obviously the borders have been shut either by quarantine or testing or, the mixed regimes around the world. So the domestic market has been, our savior since the lockdown was finished in India towards the end of May. And, we've had a difficult time like every airline, but we were fortunate in that we came into this crisis with a reasonable amount of cash. And as I mentioned, the domestic market has gradually been unlocked by the government, and we work very closely with them and with the Ministry of Civil Aviation. And we're very, happy that they've increased the amount of flying within India. So we're back to about 80% now what we were at before COVID hit. I think, we would like to go to 100% as soon as possible, and we've been quite public about that. And we look forward to also getting back into the international markets. We have been able to operate so-called bubbles between India and certain markets, particularly the Gulf in our case. But we increasingly look towards the east, and we look forward to Asia opening up again for India, because it's been shut, and it was before COVID. It was very much a focus for us. We were expanding very fast. We started flights into China, into Vietnam, Malaysia, a host of different Phuket and Thailand, a host of different destinations in the east, and I really look forward to that coming back, as well as our flights into the Middle East and Istanbul, for instance.
Well, that's interesting because, what you're talking about there, in a sense, are relatively newer markets for India in terms of international tourism. Obviously, the traditional Western tourists come over. Obviously, you get tourists from nearby. But then going to the Far East, going to, as you said, the Gulf states, obviously, are going to be a huge source. And that area of the world is, again, fingers crossed, it's better off in a sense in terms of COVID than much else of the world, isn't it?
You're talking about East Asia, yes. I mean, places like Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan in particular, have managed the pandemic incredibly well. I mean, very low numbers of infections and mortality in Taiwan. I mean, it's in single digits mortality, I think, there. And then Singapore, has also managed it very tightly. But again, it's one thing to manage the pandemic within your own territory, but it's another before you start, opening up. And I think that obviously for Indian tourism and attracting people into India, it's going to be critical. So we'll see, how the quarantine regimes and the testing regimes pan out, and of course the vaccination as well, which seems the biggest opportunity that we have to improve things, worldwide generally.
In some countries, Willie, there has been some tension between what the airline industry and airports want and what the government and the health sector, if you like, are suggesting. How much have you worked together with, say, Rupinder and her colleagues in terms of pushing forward?
Well, I think in India, actually, it's been pretty harmonious. I don't think there's been the same tensions that you had maybe in the UK. Or in the US for that matter. Obviously the airlines are going to want to add back capacity, as soon as possible. I mean, they are very cash generative businesses in normal times, but they depend on that cash flow. And when airlines are not getting revenue in, then it's a huge issue, obviously. So I can understand why in other parts of the world that there has been a lot of tension and so on. But we've had support from the government. I mean, one initiative I can mention is that they've straightened a lot of the air routes and taken back some of the air routes from purely military use and allowing civilian use. And this is going to be, very, very helpful to us, is very helpful to us in terms of reducing the amount of fuel, obviously, that we burn and reducing our cost. So, we work very closely, obviously, with the Ministry of Civil Aviation and the Director General of Civil Aviation to try to make sure that, the environment we're operating in is optimal. And I think it will be, going back to tourism, I think once things open up again, then, we have a very, very positive view of the future of Indian tourism and Indian aviation generally. And hence, all through the crisis, we've maintained our order book of aircraft. We took 44 aircraft last year from Airbus, which was the most of any airline in the world. And we're very proud of that. And we're bringing in more fuel efficient aeroplanes. And we think the future, as I say, is absolutely bright for Indian aviation and Indian tourism.
We're going to definitely talk about sustainability and that, and how much that will be the focus of the future a little bit later in the conversation. Let me turn to Vikram. Do you share the optimism that Willie's got about the future of tourism?
Absolutely. Thank you, Rajan. Thank you, Pata, BBC, for having me on. Thank you, Ms. Brar, for giving us a pre-COVID situation in India, Renu post-COVID, and of course the domestic tourism front. Let me preface my few minutes under the sun with you here. We were having perhaps the best year, the best season ever the country has ever witnessed in all segments of our business, be it luxury, first class, budget, etc., etc. It all fell off the cliff in mid-March of 2020. We had close to 1,000 people on the ground, and fortunately, working in concert with the airlines, hotels, we were able to get them out by the 21st or 22nd, the deadline when all the airlines completely ceased to operate international flights. Now, a company like ours, and I speak for the inbound industry, we solely work on incoming travel into India, and that is international travel. We are unfortunately not in the domestic market, and so it's been a very difficult period for us to keep our heads above the water. And I share with you because we have thousands of employees across the industry. I can speak for my own company. I have a little more than 107 employees. We have collectively, I think, as an industry, had shown a good report card. We've been able to maintain at least a good 75 to 80% of our employees, manage them with pay cuts and so on and so forth. Coming to your question on the way forward, I think we are optimists, and the report card on India has been brilliant. I think Ms. Brar has actually shared how we are handling the situation across the country. I mean, today, before we opened this discussion, we spoke on the sidelines and we said, today India's less than 150,000 cases across the country, which is phenomenal. I don't want to speak too soon. I hope no wild cards hit us in the next few days or weeks and so on and so forth. But given the size, the length and breadth of our country, our report card is fantastic. Now, what is more worrisome is in our principal markets. So if our first principles are the Americas, and then the second principles remain the continent, UK and the continent, and thereon from into coming to Asia, the first two markets are not displaying a very healthy report card, unfortunately. And our only hope, the linchpin, is going to be the vaccine. Once that vaccine comes into play, yes, we can speak about bio bubbles and have air corridors. Thank you, Willie. Thank you for all the airlines who are doing all that. But that's not going to fly. In actuality, our borders have to open to international tourism. Tourist visas have to be reinstated. Business visas, of course, are, I think, already reinstated. That's not a problem. But I think things have to come back to normal. I don't believe anybody is going to come to India and stay at a lovely luxury Palace Hotel by Taj and say, I'm going to be in quarantine for 7 days or 14 days. That's not going to happen. And when people come to India, they come for experiences. They come to mingle with our crowds, see our bazaars, go to our souks, embrace all the elements of what the country has to offer. After all, that's what India stands for, incredible India. So yes, while you will have a lot of people, and we have tweaked our programs to make sure that we do our itineraries and our sightseeings early mornings when the markets are slowly opening up. A lot of our programs are going into wildlife parks, central India, but that's only a small part of tourism to India. The real main part of tourism to India is our rich antiquities and the wealth and culture and heritage of Rajasthan, the backwaters of Kerala, up to the northeast, central India. So till things start to stabilize and normalize, we will not really see normal tourism come back in large numbers. And I don't believe that's going to happen before October. Of course, notwithstanding any wild cards that any new fresh strain from any less fortunate country comes to India, because that'll be a real bummer. But other than that, we're all geared up. Let me tell you, Rajan. I mean, as I speak for my company, we're across the globe. You know, wherever you look, there's an Abercrombie in Kent operation. We're completely geared up. Once things kind of settle down, we'll be ready to welcome tourists. And 2022 looks incredible. I can share with you. And I'll before I pause, why I say this is we were very fortunate because we had a very good January, February, March of 2020. Now we had a very healthy booking season for October, November, December of 2020. We actually kept the money in house for 75, 80% of the people and moved their bookings to October, November, December of 2021. Now, notwithstanding, if things don't open up during this period, a lot of them have said, we are happy to move our bookings to first quarter 2022 or the last quarter. So they believe in the destination, and hence the level of optimism is there. It's only a matter of time.
So these are clients in the Americas, in Europe, that you're talking about particularly? Particularly. You see, we always, we're the big elephant. The big elephant swims in the big elephant in the big markets. In the US is the big market. The UK is the big market. Continent is the big market. They have the propensity to expend the kind of dollars that Ms. Brar for Ministry of Tourism wants, the hotels want, we want star category tourists coming to India. We're also a long haul destination, Rajan. So for people to come to India, there's a big commitment. It's not just you just on a whim. You decide to come to India 48 hours or 72 hours. No, you plan it ahead. So fortunately, most of our tourism books 9 months, 6 months, worst case scenario, 3 months out, because they book the international flights, they book their hotels of choice, they book a self-respecting tour operator, whether it's in the international markets or a DMC in the country. So they book and plan ahead. It's not on a whim. It's not a fly flip flop in Goa or Kerala but nothing wrong with that too. But they plan ahead. Yeah, yes, it's not budget. It's a long-term big thing. Yeah,
it's a big commitment before they decide to come to India.
Just going to that point, Rupinder, I want to, because basically both Willie and Manu have got in a sense fallbacks in terms of the domestic market, but something like Vikram's talking about, very much reliant on the West, really, international tourism, certainly. What help can you and the government give to Vikram and other people working in that sector?
Rajan, first I must say that whatever Vikram was saying was sounding music to my ears, because the bookings, the bookings have moved to the coming winter season, and that's fantastic. And that also gives out the message that people still believe in incredible India, and also believe that we are still a great destination to come back to. What we could do, and we have been in extensive discussions with all the stakeholders. I've had long chats with Renu, and we understand the needs of promoting the whole confidence factor that needs to go out to the rest of the world. And as we were talking before this in the fireside, Rajan, the fact that the Indians themselves have started to travel is a huge confidence creator. Because if you go on the social media currently, and we are getting a huge following on that, people are loving seeing us travel, because nothing creates more confidence than actually doing something. And the fact that domestic travel has picked up is itself a great promotional support for us. Having said that, we are coming out with an extensive global media campaign. We are kind of sort of just waiting that just what is the right time to go out and go aggressive and launch that. But everything is in readiness, and very soon we should be pitching out there. And also pitching, there are some different products this time. I think we need to capitalize and leverage, as I mentioned in my earlier session also, on the wildlife sanctuaries, the heritage, the open spaces, and the yoga, the wellness, the entire, the lifestyle, so to say, that we are famous for. And yes, the inbound traveler does need to come back, because we are waiting for you. And that's the message going out, is going to be that very message, that Namaste, incredible India, we are waiting for you. You know, that's going to be the tagline, hopefully. So yes, I think the government needs to send a message out through the promotional campaigns. We are going to also aggressively push for more road shows, as and when travel sort of allows that to happen, and create much more dialogue with organized companies and tour operators, who are the ones who really bring the bulk business. It could be digital platforms, it could be companies like Abercrombie. And so I think we all need to work together. We are already in dialogue with Uber, and Airbnb. So I think all the partners need to come together and create a confident ecosystem in India in the times to come.
And when it comes to the unemployment issue, I mean, Vic, I mentioned that there are, inevitably there are the pay cuts at least, and then some people have suffered. I mean, again, how are you going to make sure that these people who perhaps have gone elsewhere or just suffered and not worked very much, how can you make sure they come back into the fold when there is a booming tourism market?
It's been a tough time. I mean, that's undeniable. And there have been pay cuts. Obviously, people have had a really rough period. And what we are looking forward to is generating the domestic demand in the short run, which at least makes sure that the industry is able to sustain itself, including all the employees. Because in India, Rajan, from the indirect and direct employment, we're close to 13% employment in the sector of tourism and hospitality, and that's significant. So we understand that we do need to create demand in the short run, perhaps more from the domestic, but in the coming times, the demand from the inbound traveler is what's really going to revive and restore the industry back. And that's what we are aggressively working for.
Now, I mentioned before this whole notion of reset and how there are irreversible changes that will be happening and are already happening in the industry now. I think one of them is digital. And I'm interested in talking to anybody who can talk to Renu or Vikram or Willie about this. How much has digitalization come in, perhaps even been accelerated by what's happened?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, perhaps I can talk from the airline point of view. I mean, there was a fundamental sort of need to make our airport experience as touchless as possible. And so at very short notice, and I'm talking sort of 3 or 4 days as we came out of lockdown, we produced new digital software which would help print bag tags, for instance, at home. We put a lot of effort behind web check-in. Previously, we were getting about 30% of our customers were checking in on the web before they came to the airport. The government mandated 100%. And that's really pretty much where we are now, except for people who have excess baggage or particular requirements. But we're well up towards 90% of all customers are now web checking in, which is great. And then we looked at, we took food service off initially, but then now we've put it back on the aircraft. And again, always looking for opportunities where we can minimize the risk to the customer. And, all part of our, as we've branded it, our lean, clean flying machine. But digitization was certainly accelerated by the crisis. And, I can only see that staying around for some time to come. And we're putting a lot of effort behind innovation in the light of what's happened in the last year.
Just one question to you, Willie, which is that Vikram mentioned that international tourism obviously is a big thing for him. I think you've got 55% of the domestic market or something like that.
Right.
How much do you rely, nonetheless, on international tourism in order to boost domestic flights?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point because as a low-cost airline, we don't have a lot of connectivity, if you like, or interline ticketing arrangements with international airlines. So sometimes it's hard to actually estimate, to what degree, we're dependent on the international visitor as opposed to the domestic. But what we've seen, particularly with, the unfortunate demise of Jet Airways, whenever it was 18 months ago, but, we're seeing that we are picking up more and more foreign tourist groups, or at least we were before the crisis hit. And it's a focus for us. And, we've talked to the Inbound Tour Operators Association and a number of people in the industry. And we actually put a lot of effort behind developing the so-called Buddhist circuit in the east of India, bringing in people from, again, mainly from Asia, through Kolkata, up into Gaya and Varanasi. That's all, of course, fallen by the wayside with the pandemic. But, that's the kind of initiative we're looking at. And, we want to boost our numbers of international tourists flying on Indigo. I think everyone will be very comfortable with our product. It's very much similar to an EasyJet type product in Europe or a Southwest in North America. It's very clean, it's very affordable, it's hassle-free. And, that's why we've got 51% of the domestic market, and we've done pretty well with it.
Okay, that's the end of the commercial, Willie. That's very good, though. Renu, what about the digital? How much is that?
I think digital is going to be a hygiene factor, and it's going to be an enabler not only for creating demand or communicating and connecting with the customer, but also enhancing the service experience of guests. Like Willie mentioned, we introduced a facility called iZest, which is contactless service for guests, like check-in, etc. You can check in on your mobile or on your web. So we believe that is going to be a permanent feature. Secondly, also communicating with guests, because you can't physically meet people today. So you have to have great connection and communication between your customers and yourself as a brand, and also the entire discovery, exploratory experience to the end, like end to end. And also, I do believe that digital will bridge the gap of revenue recovery in the future. Because, like we've already, during the pandemic, for example, all our restaurants were closed, everything was closed. So what we decided to engage with our consumers through our digital medium, especially social media, by, connecting our chefs with our guests to keep them engaged, because that was one area where people were focusing a lot of attention.
Yes,
so you see a lot of retail stores have turned to selling homeware or food. So we've also converted some of our shops into Cumin shops to, link to our Cumin app. So I do feel digital is going to be the way forward, not only for business, but even as your DNA, the company's DNA, your employees, your staff, your customers, your vendors, everybody, digital will just come in the forefront. So it's just got accelerated. You know, it's just not
that's so
action.
interesting. That's so interesting. The whole idea of a chef becoming much more of a brand,
Right.
the whole notion of social media, influencers, all that aspect. Yes, that's definitely moved on a lot. Let me ask you about that, Vikram. If you're much more of a traditional, if you like, luxury kind of brand, are you embracing more digital and more kind of social media stuff?
Absolutely, Rajan. Actually, not now. We've been doing this for quite a while on two fronts. One is reaching out digitally to the world about the product, and because we have such a wide array of a product across the world. So we harness the power of digital media for the longest time in our principal markets. So be in the US, UK, continent, wherever Australia, we work with our clients, we work with the all potential customers. So we've reformatted our programs all to go digital and also compatible with phones. On the domestic side, on the DMC level, and along with a lot of my own industry peers, we all have been using the power of digital for the longest time, because there is no real interface with the customer. So everything goes digitally on email, and all our programs are very nicely laid out. It's all down to a science now, Rajan. So harnessing the power of digital is absolutely the way forward. And of course, let me share with you, the airlines in India, besides the hotels, the airlines make us very proud. Today, I mean, I've been flying now within the country ever since the lockdown lifted. Ever since July, I've been flying. I've been going to Goa. I've been going up to the mountains. Of course, embracing all the health and safety measures that one has to take. But Indigo and their other comp set are doing a great job in the skies, both in terms of the pre-boarding experience, the boarding experience, on board and off board. So I think we as a country are completely geared up for receiving international clients. And that's a message I think I would like to share, because my business is completely to a standstill. And unless Ms. Brar and her good offices don't open international borders, reinstate visas, etc., I cannot put more high-end guests into Renu's hotels, and of course, fly Indigo Airlines.
I think I get what you're saying there. I know we have questions that we want to ask, and Paul, I think, is going to step in with those questions in a second. But I just want to put the last point to you in this bit to you, Rupina, which is in terms of sustainability, because we have to talk about this, because the tourism industry, travel industry does get a bad name sometimes for its attitude to sustainability. Everyone's talking about green, healthy, open air right now, but in the future, how can we guarantee that sustainability in all senses is maintained and pushed forward? Is that something that you can guarantee as part of the government?
It's a very valid concern, in fact, Rajan, and I must share with all of you that as we go forward and as we see the footprint, in fact, increasing. So while at one side, it's a great thing to see the numbers rising, whether it's the domestic or the foreign, but there's also concern on carrying capacity, that are we not ruining the destinations? Are we creating future problems? So we are already working very closely with the Ecotourism and the Responsible Tourism Society. We're also roping in a lot of initiatives of the Ministry of Environment and Forest, something that we were not doing hitherto very closely, in making sure that all the developmental plans that are coming around most of the destinations factor in that how do we use local materials, how do we use sustainable materials, and also create a lot of alternate destinations. Because if you're going to be going to the same places and thronging the same 4 or 5 places, then clearly there is a limit to the carrying capacity of that place. For example, for Ladakh, we've kicked in a very, very intense study where how do we really develop Ladakh? Because while we want all of you to come and be there, but at the same time, we want you to do that in a sustainable manner. So we are going to create a whole campaign on that. In fact, I'm currently working on it see how could we do a 365 days campaign on sustainability, because sustainability is going to be a lot of things put together. And in fact, I'll pick up also from the digitization, a lot of processes that would be able to be on the digitized versions would also help in creating more sustainable environments and less use of the natural resources of Mother Earth. So yes, it shall remain a huge concern in times to come.
Okay, thank you. Paul, if you can bring you back in, I think you might have some questions from the audience.
John, you can go to the questions. You can go to the questions yourself.
Oh, okay. I beg your pardon. I didn't realize I had this responsibility too. Let's go to chat and look at some questions.
Under Q&A.
Yeah. So I've got lots of greetings. I beg your pardon, Paul. I'm not seeing the questions. Oh, hang on, Q&A. Forgive me.
The ones that haven't been answered.
Yeah. We've got one from Sarah, who says, Sarah, I said, I'd like to know how Indian tourism sector survives during the pandemic. Do you have any specific strategy to ensure tourism sector is still running during this time? What can government do to help those people who are affected during the pandemic? Okay, fine. So Rupinder, perhaps you can talk to this. This is basically, I think, worrying about individuals, obviously, who are working within the industry and what help you've given them.
So right in the beginning, the first few weeks was the governmental support started coming in terms of pushing back the moratoriums, extending periods for repaying their loans. I think that started to help a lot of people, and a lot of taxes, levies, the compliance dates were pushed back because obviously there was no business happening. So those were the kind of steps that the Ministry of Finance through the Government of India came up with. The state governments in turn also started revisiting some of the property taxes and state levies, which were also pushed back. So those are the kind of economic support systems that came in. And we have in the meantime, as I'm continuously focusing on creating the demand factor, making sure that the market and the stakeholders were actually ready to receive guests, at least in the domestic market to begin with. And I'm sure Renu will agree with me, because we were working very closely in the beginning on making sure that all the stakeholders were actually equipped to handle post-COVID scenarios. And I must congratulate the entire industry that even though it's been challenging times, but they actually started respecting the protocols very early on. So whether we saw restaurants or homestays, bed and breakfast institutions, the hotels that were away from the main cities, all ended up creating a lot of demand. And that's what actually has, in some ways, despite all the challenges, held back the industry in just about holding on in these very, very challenging times.
Okay, another one to you from Gary White. He says, most national tourist offices have a mandate to promote international travel. Has India reviewed the role and remit of the National Tourist Board and how it works with regional tourist boards and DMOs and industry?
Yes, in fact, it's been a period of great learning for us, that as we take the Incredible India story forward. So we don't work through a board currently. We still work through the ministry, but then the ministry has a lot of field formation offices. We have about 20 offices in India and 8 offices overseas. And we are working very closely, not only with the provincial governments, but also with the stakeholders into what kind of content should really be sent out. What's the kind of message we would like the world to see? What is India all about in this era as we go forward?
Okay, and again, another question to you really, which is, what role does India distributing vaccines to other destinations play for tourism in the long run, both for them and India?
I think it's a huge confidence building activity. Already consignments have started going out of India, and it just makes you feel confident that here is a country that has already handled the pandemic really, really well. I think, as Vikram said, fingers, toes, body cross for now, but we hope that there's going to be no funny strain that comes up. But so far, so good. I think we've handled it really well. And now with the vaccine, and that also developed within India, rolling out for its own people, and also having the capacity to send it out to other countries in the world, should create a huge, huge message for an India that is confident to receive all of you, to come back and be with us.
Great. Well, I must admit that the message I'm getting from you all really is of cautious optimism, and it's a breath of fresh air, frankly, because certainly where I am, it's not looking great. But I'm really pleased. I'm really hopeful, and even for you, Vikram, because obviously you're dependent on all sides of the world really recovering. But I want to thank you all for this. And I really hope that this time next year, well, actually before then, I'm allowed to come over there and explore more of India, find more surprises, and perhaps even talk to you all in person. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for this.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you very much to all our panelists. And of course, thank you once again to Rajan. Oh, it's a pleasure to be working with you. I do have to say, yes, the discussion has been very positive. I know it's been a difficult year, more than a year now, almost more than a year now. But it's good to hear that people still have hope and still have positive, positive thoughts about the future of tourism. And so it's always great to hear that. Again, thank you to all our speakers. You guys can all turn your videos off, and I'll just do a quick wrap up here, and just as we just finally say a few words as I wrap up here. Well, again, thanks again to the Ministry of Tourism, to BBC Global News, of course, to our panelists, Indigo, Abercrombie and Kent, and India Hotels, and. If you've enjoyed this webinar, or please do join us for our future events. In just a couple of weeks, we will have our Pada Beyond events from February 8th to the 11th. It's virtual. You can register now. If you are a travel recovery solution provider, whether it's tech or marketing or technical infrastructure, sustainability, you can still exhibit. For members, it's free to exhibit. For visitors, it's free to join. So do please join us. Registration is open, so you can join us today. Also in April, we will have our Pada Annual Summit from April 27th to 29th. We will be virtual, but it is actually sponsored. One of our sponsors is the Ras Al Khaimah Tourism Development Authority, so please do keep a lookout for further information about that event. But if you have any questions, if you want to register now or register interest, you can just go to our website at www.pada.org to find out more information. If you have any questions about today's webinar or any of our future webinars or activities that we do at Pada, feel free to contact me. Email is very simple. It's paul@pada.org. And you can also find all information at our website, www.pada.org. If you've enjoyed this webinar, all our webinars are actually uploaded on our YouTube page, so you can go check out our YouTube page. Just search Pada TV, like and subscribe to the page, and keep updated with all our previous webinars, and also watch some of our old webinars, and the ones that maybe you've missed coming up in the future. You can catch them on our YouTube channel. And with that, once again, I'd like to thank our speakers, the Ministry of Tourism, our great partner, BBC News, of course, all our speakers, Rajan, Renu, Vikram, really, and also I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. Please do stay tuned for future episodes of the Destination Webinar, Destination Insights series with BBC. We will have more coming up in the next few months. And with that, that is the end of today's webinar. Thank you so much and have a pleasant day. Take care.